Hello and welcome. This is exclusive interview on AD4 TV radio. I am Tunde Hassan. The global community is replete with professionals across different fields, from politics to technology, religion to education, health and the sciences, business and much more. One line connects the professionals in these various fields, and that is each of these professionals are graduates of institutions of learning. Later in life, after school, they group themselves into associations, otherwise known as alumni or old students associations. My guest on exclusive interview, Professor Rutger Goffwen, a professor of sociology, is the president of one of these old students' bodies. He joins me shortly to engage issues around the impact of old students in national affairs for good or for not so good after this report.
The global community is filled up with professionals across different fields. These individuals are graduates of institutions of learning at various levels. In the course of life, the individuals converge into alma mater groups, generally called alumni or old student associations. In some climes, these associations are known by varying names such as fraternity or sisterhood, old boys or old girls. These associations are formed as a medium for graduated students to foster the bonds created during period of studies and contributes to the development of the institution. They also serve as role models for other students still in school. On a larger scale, these old students play key roles at the larger community and national levels, influencing the affairs of state. Also, it is not unusual for these bodies to seek to influence the socio-economic life of many nations in a way that favors their membership. Today, there is a tendency for alumni bodies of institutions to grant favors to fellow alumni irrespective of competence, qualification, and merit considerations. This situation has raised concerns in certain quarters over what is referred to as classmate syndrome, said to be impacting on the vital question of equal access without exclusion or nepotistic considerations. Ostensibly, the old student syndrome is gradually becoming a deciding factor in granting opportunities such as appointments in critical areas of national affairs. These are some of the issues the guest on exclusive interview, Professor Rutger Goffwen, engages in a moment.
Thank you very much, Professor Goffwen, for joining me on our exclusive interview. You are the president of one of the, let's say, frontline old students associations in Nigeria, the Gindere Old Students Association, GOSA. Now, in terms of the place of bodies like yours in the scheme of national affairs, can we beat our chest to say that such bodies are making contributions, and is it sufficient?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Tunde Hassan, for having me on the program, and it's my pleasure to be on the program. First, I will say that looking at the contributions and the impact of this Old Students Association on the nation, the first point, or the first thing I want to note, is that relatively, whether we like it or not, we are living today in a knowledge-driven society. And the backbone of all societies that have advanced, including ours that are seeking to launch themselves at a certain level, is the fact that education is the backbone. More important, beyond the primary, the secondary is the most important. And so whether we like it or not, education has become a veritable tool for the survival of every nation. And it is the kind of persons you produce that reflect or have an impact on the country or society in general, either in the short term or long term. You see, most of these associations have emerged, and especially the older ones that have been able to outlive some certain traditions, and history has now vindicated them in the sense that products of these institutions have been able to launch themselves into greater heights. And then, seemingly by virtue of the training and the quality of the education they've gotten, it has enabled them to now impact positively, thereby enabling them to play leadership, or assume leadership positions ahead of others. So I think relatively that is it. But in terms of the role they have, certainly they have a role to play, because they must contribute towards the development of society. But more important, remember that they've gone ahead to receive further training, and they've now become persons of some certain standing in various fields. And it is expected that that should impact positively wherever you are. But more important, take for example, you train as a doctor. Of course, you were not trained as a doctor in your secondary school, but that the upbringing, the conditioning, at the secondary school should be able to now help you meaningfully impact, use that skill as a professional, as a doctor, or as whatever professional, to impact positively on society. I think that is where the difference comes in, because remember that good parenting has an impact, whether you like it or not. And that's the difference between somebody who grew up properly and the other any other person that did not. You may end up having the same qualifications, the same kind of background and training, but then that makes a difference.
Now, you find that individuals like you, who went through some kind of character molding, some kind of education conditioning, so to speak, have emerged stronger and now aggregate themselves into bodies that are you concerned that the schools you left, because that's the stories we hear, the schools you left are not the way that you are not the way you left them today.
Yes.
There's a total decay and decline in the quality of character and the quality of education and the total environment. What led to this disconnect? Because it exists.
Yes, you're very right. I think that is very, very worrying. I think by the time you go around most of these schools, especially the premier institutions that have produced the kind of leaders that, have dominated anything to do with providing leadership in Nigeria today, it is quite appalling, because if you go to those institutions, the level of decay, it becomes, it is something that you at times wonder whether it is true. These kind of persons really underwent, training in these institutions, because some of them, they're just names by now. And that is where we have a problem, because as you've rightly pointed out, there was quality, there was discipline, there was focus, and everything was done properly. Of course, with increase in population, technology, a lot of things have, intervened as variables. So of course, the platform has changed. And ironically, we've moved away from, the communal type attitude and setting that we had, where everybody was his brother's keeper. Your son was my own son. Whatever he did wrong, I counseled him and disciplined him accordingly, and you had no reservation. But all of a sudden, I think, coupled with urbanization and movement, left and right, today we become strangers. We've become, the architects of our own problems today. How dare you talk to my child? And ironically, people that sent their children to school so that they will turn out to be better persons, to be well disciplined. Once upon a time, remember that the teacher was the most important person in society. When you were stubborn to a certain extent. Your parents even told you, I think I'm going to report you to your teacher, and you were like, well,
you put yourself together.
Exactly. But all of a sudden today, the teacher is now the victim. You find parents walking in to say, how dare you touch my child? Who told you to do this? You know, we've had such incidences. So you discover that, you see, the space is shrinking, and then we're becoming individualistic. And so we've moved away from that. And arising from that, of course, is the communal property is now somebody else's own. What we thought was ours and we guarded jealously is now becoming, just, is somebody else's own. And it becomes more of a rite of passage. You just go to secondary school and that's the end. But the expectation about the molding, the impact, in terms of your character, even the learning and the discipline is no longer there. So you see, these are factors that are now responsible for the decay and the collapse. And then coupled with the fact that today, given the fact that we thought we were now trying to improve on access, so a lot of schools have been established. Government has tried to intervene in one way or the other, because remember that at that early stage they were basically private. I think the missionary institutions, yes, were now at the forefront, and the missionaries were actually the backbone of bringing or advancing Western education. So now to democratize the process, or now to enhance access, government tried to intervene. But you see, I don't think there was proper planning in terms of what to do. So you have government secondary schools, you have government day secondary schools, you have federal government colleges. Of course, yes, we're opening up the space so that we improve on access, but then in terms of planning for them, management, the managerial aspect, administratively, to now take care of these things.
You got all of that wrong.
Yes.
Well, you should know, you're also a scholar and educationist. Now, the contradiction here is that those who went through that kind of tutelage with character, with strength and quality of the academic curriculum and stuff like that, emerged as the leaders who were supposed to help plan and maybe deepen the arrangement that they also benefited from. What stopped them from continuing that process?
Well, actually, as I said, remember that the scope has now expanded beyond the point
more
people, bureaucracy,
desire for more access and stuff.
Exactly. So with all these, it calls for a complete different arrangement. And because of that, it becomes very difficult in terms of now planning, or rather it requires a lot of planning to overcome the difficulties and the challenges you are going to face with these with the kind of expansion. Remember that there's an increase in population. So of course, whether you like it or not, you must plan towards accommodating that. But I think what is fundamentally lacking is the fact that there's no planning. And remember that even these characters, in most cases, they are left on their own, because others have also come from different backgrounds to join them. So at a point in time, or rather you get to a point where you discover that you have conflicting views, because people that have come from other backgrounds too are there. And of course, that is it. So that is what the dynamism of the system has now left us with. But it's not an excuse. We should be able to insist at a certain point. Because remember that discipline, and that is part of what the traditional, and that's why they're quick to say, well, these are old ways, these are traditional, you just have to change. But you see, of course, change is important, and you can't do without change. It's a must. But change must be done in such a way that you accommodate it so that it doesn't disrupt. But you see, we've allowed the changes to disrupt the smooth flow to the point that you are just changing without even analyzing what you are changing,
and what the consequence of what you're doing is on the system.
Yes.
Well, we are engaging issues around all student bodies in the context of national affairs, what impact such bodies make, or whether it's sufficient to give credence to their existence. And I have in the studio with me Professor Rodgard Agofine, who is the president of one of such old student bodies, the Gindere Old Students Association. It's one of those, the premier institutions in the country. We'll return to continue the discussion on exclusive interview shortly.
There's a wind of change blowing over Nigeria, and it's coming from the Tertiary Education Trust Fund. If you want to find out how TED Fund is bringing the Nigerian government, industry, and the academia together to drive a new knowledge economy, tune in to this station every Wednesday at 8 p.m. for TED Fund, the paradigm shift. It's informative, it's innovative, and it's exciting. TED Fund, the paradigm shift, proudly produced by 84 TV Radio.
You're welcome back. Exclusive interview on 84 TV Radio, and I have in the studio with me Professor Rodgad Agofine, President Gindere Old Students Association. We're discussing the impact and the place, the role of Old Student Association in the context of navigating national affairs. Once again, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Before we went on that break, we're looking at what really went wrong, because so much has gone wrong between when these old students were in school and what is happening now. Now, other questions have also been thrown up. While the old students were in school, especially the premier ones like yours, they had the best of arrangements, almost seamless, with little challenges. Today, they're running and driving affairs across spheres of national development. We're having problems, especially within the educational setup. It is not as glorifying as it used to be while you were there, and you are running it now. Is that not an indictment?
Well, it is accepted, because certainly, as you've rightly noted, standards have fallen. There's a general decay, and the presiding officers are still persons that you expect them to have done better. And I think that is where the indictment comes in. And that was why I said, well, the starting point is to first accept that, yes, something is wrong. And you are part of it. You must accept responsibility, you see, because part of what I've noticed in this country is nobody wants to accept responsibility. It is always wanting to
shift the
say, well, this one did not do, or this is what is responsible for it. But first, accept the responsibility, because you are part of it. You are a living part of it. So I think that is a starting point, that we have allowed things to go wrong completely. Of course, things cannot continue on the smooth path all the time. Whether you like it or not, life cannot continue, to be that smooth. But the point is, we should have anticipated. We should have worked towards ensuring that some of these things were already planned for. And so as they come, they were not things that would things that would destabilize the system.
Now we have disruptions.
Exactly.
We have disruptions.
Yes.
And one other irony is that while these members of this old students association got the best of benefits, quote unquote, from the state, they are denying these ones that are coming up, those ones, the students that are there now, anything near benefits while in school.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two is, in this country we have comments like the old students syndrome, which tends to portray the old students like as a cabal, as a cult orientation. What's your reaction to this perception of old students?
Yeah.
It's my friend, we're in school, and I therefore want him in this position and not that position, and deny others from other schools access to that position. Isn't that tending towards nepotism?
Well, to a certain extent, I understand the fears and the issues you are raising. First, in connection with denial of people of this generation the kind of benefits that you enjoyed. First, we must understand that there are competing demands and needs now.
Much more than before.
Much more than before. Remember that, people were even encouraged to go to school with some kind of little incentives. That was done just to ensure that people, and especially in the northern part of the country, to encourage you to go to school. Now we've outgrown that. That is the fact. We must come to terms with the reality that education is a must, and it is your responsibility to ensure that you pursue whatever educational training to a logical conclusion, because you don't fit, and you can't fit, so it's not what somebody should even encourage you. But you see, we even lack in that aspect of orientation. And second, given the competing needs, the population and everything, government, for example, cannot do everything. We must accept that. There is where we need to also subsidize the cost in terms of now helping out to do what we need to do, by ensuring that the needful is done. So in terms of that, certainly we can't say that, well, we can give the same. But my thinking is that in terms of environment, the conducive environment is what we should never compromise. Policy and standards, these are things that I thought that we should, no matter what, ensure that those values are held. And then furthermore, in connection with whether, people of the same alma mater have a temptation of always wanting, of course,
aggregating towards one another.
Remember that we're living now in a competitive world. And the moment there's competition, people want to use whatever means, and that's what we're seeing today in this country, because there is a collapse. And so things are not moving smoothly. We've gotten to a position where you must know somebody before something, you get something done. We've heard of people saying, well, they've gone for interviews or whatever, and they ask you, who directed you to come for this interview? On whose authority? These are some of the things we hear, but we've never proven some of them, but these are the kind of gossips that go around. And if such is anything to go by, the manifestation that we're now beginning to see, the aggregation, as we're talking about, of all students, is all because of, well, you need some kind of protection, security. Remember that it provides you with a broad-based platform for connectivity. And remember that you were brought together by some, bond of friendship, which over time, by virtue of staying in school together, doing a lot of things, and that is the advantage that they had by virtue of going to boarding schools that, were really family type,
communal.
Yes, communal, so it was more of a family type arrangement by virtue of going to those schools, because whether you like it or not, you see there's the kind of bonding,
and they got to know each other much more.
Yes. So unlike today that people are schooling from home, so it is just the classroom. Beyond that, there's nothing. But remember that these were persons you stayed for 5 years, some 6 years, and then the breaks were just regular but short. So most of the time, you were actively engaged, and then you had different activities that brought you together, even outside. I
remember you were always eager to return to school.
Return to school, yes, that was it, because there was a lot of fun, and then the togetherness. So you see that bonding, and then of course growing up together, everybody has his own ways. Some get more privilege, and they get to some certain position. So of course the connectivity, the tendency, oh well, look, we went through a lot.
This old boy factor in national affairs, has it helped or further dampened the movement towards progress, growth and development in this country?
Well,
has it helped as a factor?
First, for me, I want to see it for those that are conscious. Take, for example, the Gimri Old Students Association. I know of the King's, I think the King's College. Yes,
the Queen's College,
exactly, and then the Baptist Old Students,
Barua Old Boys and stuff.
I think some of them have been conscious enough to know that, look, first, the starting point is to pay back. So if you go to those schools today, you discover that they are deeply involved in supplementing the cost.
Paying back.
Undertaking to do some projects, bringing, whatever that you think can augment, but more important to ensure that the schools are not completely shut or left on their own to struggle with all the problems we're having today. So, of course, that's a starting point. And of course, they are contributing towards national development, because that is the kind of spirit we want to encourage. Remember where you're coming from. Remember to add value to what you left behind. That's the most important thing. So for me, from that axis, I would say yes, relatively they've been able to do better in terms of impacting on national development. But then second, in terms of what they have done as individuals, I know that some of them have done so well. Take, for example, the first military administrator of the then Benue Plateau State, J.D. Gomwok. That's a household name in anything to do with Plateau State, Benue State, Nasarawa State, and even parts of Taraba. You go there, you discover that there are structures from secondary, education, name all spheres, even the road networking today that we are finding it difficult to maintain. Was believed that, it was during his time that all these things, all these foundations were laid. So these are the kind of things we expect from people. Whether you like it or not, it's a reference point. What you need to do now is to either improve on it or to do better for successive administrators.
Do you see that happening?
And ironically,
today we're running a knowledge-driven economy.
Yes.
The globe is knowledge-driven. With experience, with the character, with the value, the general molding of those who are in All Students Association today. Do you see Nigeria emerging from, drawing from this resource?
Well, we're not, because it has now become quite competitive. Remember, as I said, the scope has expanded. Others have come in. Remember that there's even rivalry. Now, for some of them, say, well, these ones that have had it too much. These are some of the kind of things we see. But, they start like jokes, but ironically, I see them happening. In the sense that, take, for example, if you go around the country today, the number of abandoned and uncompleted projects outweigh the kind of services that we provide. And so the moment somebody comes in, instead of looking at the value of what has already been started
and continuing
to ensure that you provide that service, it ends there. My regime is going to do A, B, C, D, we're starting off again. It doesn't even mind, even if you have already an institution there, he moves over to the next spot to start the same institution. You see, these are the kind of problems we're having. And remember that there's a disconnect completely, even in terms of our orientation. I know partly is because of the instability the country has gone through politically, jumping from one military administration to the other, and then, then the journey back to democracy, in and out and whatever. And so we're now struggling to now stabilize. But we are yet to ingrain the culture of continuing from where somebody stopped, adding value to what somebody has done. We're yet to do that. And then to worsen the condition, our own kind of orientation with politics. This political party comes today and then it writes up everything that other one has done. And I don't think that is the right conduct. Of course, policies change because every party, for example, has its own. So I believe that all students have this responsibility of reminding people where they came from. And if you look at these old students associations and some of these old schools, it brought people from left and right the country. People of different faiths. That was the idea of the whole thing. I know of a lot of emirs and very responsible,
eminently paid
yes, sending their children to some specific schools because they want them to be properly brought up. That was it. That was it.
And now we've
lost all of that. So you just see this person, is this person, you read him from either his religious or ethnic.
We have so many of these religious bigots, ethnic jingoists, which never happened in those schools.
Never.
Funny thing is that the old students who bonded together are the ones tearing because they're in the leadership.
Well, ironically, yeah. Because I know that, yes, it was so smooth and good to the point that there were even exchange programs. Specifically. So if they went, to the, whatever part of the country, once you're in Form 3, you're now taken from your school, then brought to this part, then you take these ones there, they go there, spend the next, like that. So that was the level at which, that bonding was going on. So irrespective of religion and ethnicity. But today, that is what has become the meal ticket for the politicians. given the kind of diversity we have, given the kind of politics we play. So it now becomes a weapon. Oh no, we are being marginalized. Oh, my religion is being marginalized. So you see, these are the kind of things. But I expect that as products of these institutions, let us always remind each other, remind others. Remember where we're coming from. It wasn't like that. It wasn't.
Are you hopeful that that situation can be rekindled, perhaps in the shortest possible period, as we draw down on this discussion?
Yes, I have, hope that that can be done, but on the condition that we consciously embark on this policy. Let's remind ourselves where we're coming from. Let's consciously work towards reviving these kind of values, because that is what Nigeria needs now. That is what Nigeria needs now. But if we don't do it consciously, certainly we're just going to have, or we'll continue to wallow in this kind of problem. And then, ironically, we just hand it over to one generation to the other.
Thank you very much, Prof. We have been discussing with Professor Rodgard Kofrin, who is the president of one of the premier students from one of the premier institutions in Nigeria, the Gindere Old Students Association, simply called GOSA. I think when you say GOSA, they have these goosebumps, they enjoy the GOSA thing. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us on how these old students' bodies impact national development, national affairs. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much for having me on the program.
And that's it on Exclusive Interview on AD4 TV Radio. I am Tunde Hassan. Thanks for being with us.